Allora, sarò brevissima, benvenute e benvenuti a tutti, siamo felici di vedervi qua. Devo doverosamente ringraziare in primis la Fondazione Cariplo, Alessandro Rubini, che ha permesso, diciamo, tutto questo. Dopodiché gli amici di Streamcolor, dico gli amici e cari perché diciamo, Giacomo è, posso dire, è stato un meraviglioso ex allievo un po' di anni fa dello IED, e Giuliana instancabile partner, diciamo, di questa cosa. Ringrazio Book Republic, ringrazio soprattutto la George Brown University di Toronto e il Politecnico di Milano. Con questo cosa dirvi? Vi auguro che passare qui allo IED 3 giorni di intenso lavoro, ci aspettiamo delle idee meravigliose e ci auguriamo tutti che sia soltanto l'inizio di una storia che avrà altre puntate sempre più al rilancio e sempre più interessanti. Quindi buon lavoro a tutti, a tutte e a tutti, e ciao a tutti. Adesso passo il microfono ad Alessandro Rubini di Fondazione Cariplo, che credo sia qua.
Grazie. Thanks to everybody. It's English. Okay. I'm really happy to be here, and I want to thank Yale University, George Brown University, and above all Streamcolor and Book Republic, because they really worked hard to get it. And I remember 1 year ago, we were all around the table just designing that. And I remember that we were drawing on the blackboard exactly this triangle. And at the end, Giacomo made a picture. Oh yeah, maybe I'm thinking I'm an idea. And so we are. So it's 1 year of hard work, but I really appreciated that. So we promoted that, but they did a really huge work. Thanks, Streamcolor, thanks, Book Republic. This is a cultural innovation event, a 3 days event of cultural innovation. It's a sort of a spin-off of a cultural innovation program by Fondazione Cariplo. This program help people with a good idea of culture, of innovation, to build around this idea their own personal cultural company. Streamcolor is one of the offspring of that program. And I'm really happy to say that the next week we start with the 4th edition of the Cultural Innovation Program. So supposedly everyone among you can participate and make the same track of Streamcolor, maybe. I hope so. Just it. The last message, it's a cultural message. Today, there are different professionals, different worlds meeting on this topic. And every time, well, you know, heritage and video games is, for me, for my generation, sort of unusual meeting. My school, my education, my parents, my teachers also thought in opposition, heritage and video games. Heritage or video games, heritage against video games. Now we are meeting this world. We are connecting this world. And every time we connect differences, every time we connect people, we connect contents or stories, we're making culture. And when we do that, we're exploring a huge potential of innovation. So think about and grow up your idea of cultural innovation, because we need so. We need you, okay? Thanks, and have a good job.
So Luigi Ferrara, from the director of George Brown College.
Hi, solo un po' parole di saluto da George Brown. Canada is a very diverse country, and I think you'll be working with our students who are here. Maybe you can put up your hands so everyone can see them. and our faculty, and who are also here and sitting in the back row, as usual. And I just want to say, every time you connect and you exchange, you grow. And I think that's the reason why we're here. And we're so grateful to our partners, YED, to the Fondazione, to Politecnico, because it really creates an opportunity for growth and change. And not only for the students, but for myself, for my faculty, and for, I think, the cities of Milan and Toronto, who are twinned. They're twin cities. They're cities that are very similar. They're both financial capitals, cultural capitals, and they really have a bent toward innovation and creativity. And I certainly can't wait to see on Sunday afternoon what your creative minds have come up with together, and what relationships have formed, and that might continue into the future. It's been a pleasure. I've worked with Fondazione Kerplo for the last 3 years, and it's been a wonderful experience for me, and I hope for the people that I've been working with there, and I hope that we continue and do many, many more things and have many more exchanges. So thank you.
So we will introduce our special guest, Linda Volkers, from Rijksmuseum, and
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me, especially because I don't know a thing about video gaming. So actually I'm here to learn from you guys. I can't wait to see all the creations you will make at the end of this camp. But there must be a reason why I'm here, except for me, a nice trip to Milan. I want to take you to a journey to the Rijksmuseum, to Amsterdam. And I want to tell you the story about the digitization of our collection, the ideas we had in mind when we undertook the project. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about the museum, and then I'm going to tell you about this project, on our ideas, what we want people to get from our collection, how they can be inspired by our collection, how they can play with our collection, even without coming to the museum, although we would really love people to come over to Amsterdam, and you're all invited, of course. This is our museum, and the museum is built in the end of the 19th century, so you see a late 19th century building, and it's from the beginning it is meant to be the national museum, the museum of the Netherlands, and we completely refurbished the entire building, and it was a long process. But in April 2013, we reopened again. And in June, we received our 10 million visitor. And that's very special for us. So let me give you an impression of that. And don't expect any fancy presentation things of me. I only have normal, regular videos. That's all I can do.
Guess where I am.
And it is for real. It's not a fake thing or something, because we were so proud of having the 10 million visitor. It was a huge milestone for us, and we thought, how could we celebrate that, and what would be interesting for someone who happened to be the 10th million visitor? And everybody always came up with the idea of spending a night with a night watch. And we can't do that never. But then we thought, well, maybe this is the occasion to do that. Because then we give a very, very special experience, and we can't give it to anyone, obviously. But this was a very, well, bold idea, and I'm so glad that it succeeded. And it was very nice, because this was an art teacher visiting the museum with his school class, and he didn't have any idea. So he was completely flabbergasted, and he had the night of his life. He didn't sleep. He slept for 2 hours or something. But that's an idea for us of bringing the museum closer to the people, because our problem has been for a while that we were a very important museum in the Netherlands and the world with some iconic masterpieces, but it was also very internally focused. And what we want to do with everything we do, and especially with our collection online, is bridging the gap that people experience. Oh, sorry. You don't need to hear that again and again. Here you see our gallery of honor, and we tell the story of the Dutch art and history of all the years. And we have 1 million objects, and we have 8,000 of them on display. So a huge part of our collection is not visible in the museum. That's simply not possible. It wouldn't fit in the building, and I'm not sure if everybody would be happy if we showed 1 million objects. So it might be too much. But the most important thing and goal for us is not only displaying the beautiful art and telling the story and make sure that everything is correct, but to conquer the real emotions and to conquer the hearts of the people. And especially for Dutch, because Dutch are always very skeptical. You and the Italians here, you love art and you're proud of it, but in Holland it's completely different. So we needed to do something about that. And with all the activities we undertake, we are looking for the relevance of our audience. And what you think is beautiful might not be the same as my idea, but that doesn't count. That's not a bad thing or something. And that view completely shifted our things at preserving our collection and at exposing our collection. And one of the things we love is that people are getting creative with our collection. And a museum in a traditional sense is very strict. Look at the pieces of paint and move on. But we thought, what can we do to, I think that the average time at looking at art is 6 seconds. 6 seconds, that's very short to get to grasp a whole meaning of a painting, right? So, but what if you start drawing or do something else? When you start looking at art, you look more closely. You look as if you were a painter yourself. You see the light, you see what Rembrandt did, you're looking at composition. So that's why we stimulate people to draw in the exhibition halls, and we had a huge campaign, and every Saturday when people visit the museum, they are given some, if they want to, obviously you don't have to do it, but you can get a sketchbook and pencils. And we love the idea of people being creative in our museum. Another clip, I hope it works.
At the Rijksmuseum, we've been seeing more and more people drawing lately. And we couldn't be more delighted, because drawing is all about looking. Drawing means you see. In fact, when you use your own eyes to look, and not your camera or your phone, your amazement is much greater. So to everyone who wants to come and draw, the Rijksmuseum says, welcome.
And that's a radical different approach too, because usually museums don't want crowds to block the way in exhibition halls. The same goes for taking photos. And I think if a lot of museums don't want us to do that. And we thought about that and we decided to allow that. We're not actually stimulating it, but we know that people are looking through the world through their phone screens and through their cameras. So you better embrace that development. You can't deny it because the world changes and the way we look at things changes. The devices we use change. So why not allow it and don't make a fuss of it? And as long as it's safe for our objects in our collection, we don't care. The only thing is that you don't use a flashlight because that might ruin the objects. And you can't use a standard or something because you're annoying the other visitors. But the world is changing and we don't see any problems in people taking a memory and having an idea of a nice visit and show it to their families. But we got a lot of criticism and other museums have another policy and that's fine if they have their own reason to do that. But we decided to be as open as possible. And an interesting idea is that through the ages, the idea was that the real deal, the real piece of art was the only thing that matters. And the first one is who came up with a different philosophy is the philosopher Walter Benjamin. In 1936, he published an article stating that making a reproduction of what kind is not very bad. It gives another extra meaning to the object. So it doesn't, the original object doesn't lose its aura of authenticity, but it adds a new element to this object, the view of the person who is taking a picture or the view of the person who is making the reproduction. And that was a revolutionary new way of looking at art and looking and working with art. And it was revolutionary that someone spoke these words, but in fact it wasn't new, because when you look at this, using arts of others has been of all ages. Here you see an etch of Hercules Segers. And Hercules Segers is an artist who's not very famous, but he lived 100 years before Rembrandt. And Rembrandt was a huge fan of Hercules. And he had 8 paintings or etches of this artist. And Rembrandt even reworked the work of this man. And I can show you this is Rembrandt's interpretation of the work of Hercules Segers. Here you see the original etch and look at the angel. Rembrandt decided it was better to leave the angel out of this work. And Rembrandt reworked the original etch plate by Hercules Segers. So it is all time. Inspiration can be drawn from many forms and many places. So artists have been inspired by other artists, well, as long as they were active. So let's keep that in mind when you create something new. So we don't mind if people are taking a memory from the thing they like most. It's just in our today's image culture very normal. Let's go back a few years to when we launched our new website, end 2012. And we thought this collection should play a prominent place on our website too. And if you look at the museum websites in general, and especially at that time, you saw mostly a lot of information, not only about how to come to the museum, but also scientific information. And of course we have this task to do that, to disclose information about what we curate and what where we were taking care of. But for a general audience, that's a lot of the time that's too much. So we thought, why not focus on the image on our website? And here you see this website design. The image is in the most prominent place. You see the image is full screen, and the only information you have is at the bottom, 3 top tasks. Go to the museum, dive into the collection, or have more information about the museum itself. So we try to do that differently than it used to be. And very important as well is that we made it responsive too. So you could view our website on any device. And at that time, the tablet emerged. So people were using other devices than a traditional desktop. And that was very good for us and very fortunate for us. But because when we decided to disclose our collection online, we also had the benefit that people could look at our collection 24/7 at any time they want, wherever they were. And that's very powerful because you don't focus on the museum visit only, but you can be in people's lives at all times. And at this process, I think it's now 10, 15 years ago, we started digitizing our collection and taking high-res images of that collection. And that was for scientific purposes, obviously, because we need those photos for our scientific work and for our publications and for our exhibitions. But then we thought, if we are making these images anyway, why not give them to the audience? Why not give them to all? We're the Museum of the Netherlands. We are the museum of everybody, so why not give those images? And we could do that because our images are copyright free because they have expired for the largest part. So that was the idea behind this brand new website at the time. And the collection, we have disclosed by now 370,000 images in high-res online, 4,500 by 4,500 pixels. And if you need another, more TIFF format or something, you have to ask it at our department because otherwise our website would completely get stuck. But the idea of disclosing those images on our website online is called Rijksstudio. And Rijksstudio is, well, of course, Rijksmuseum. And the studio is a place where you can be, where you can make your own collections. You can make your own sets of the works, of our works of art. I'll come to that back later. Here you see the landing page of this Rijksstudio. What we wanted to do is make some collections and make some sets available digitally, our choice, our pick, what we think is relevant. And we wanted to achieve that people would be in contact with our collection more and more. But we didn't want to do it ourselves only. We wanted to give a role to people themselves. So this is what our timeline looks like now. You see all kinds of collections that we have created ourselves, but also that people have made. And all these collections are displayed in a visual timeline. And we heavily relied on Pinterest, because with pinning all the images to your boards, it's actually similar to what we've done. And here you see in our timeline, you see the collections made by us and made by our users and by our fans. And that's also for a museum very special, because it used to be the curator who dictated what was important or not. But we thought it's up to the people themselves. So you see here a user-generated timeline. This is how it works. You see, this is a detail of our art. And you see at the bottom of the website page, you see some information. You can click through and get some additional information. But at first, you see only the image. So you don't have any barriers to enjoy our art. If you want to save it or want to share it with others through social media, it's okay. it's fine. You can do that. You don't have to pay anything. You can just with one mouse click download our images in high res, and you can do whatever you want to do with it. You can zoom in as well too. And you can see very, very tiny details. Because of the high resolutions, you're able to see more than you would see when you were in the museum gallery itself. And we use, as employees, we use Rijksstudio as well. And I see more when I look at this Rijksstudio images, because I can zoom in the areas I would like, and then you see wonderful, amazing details you've never imagined. So that's very powerful. So the idea of bringing our collection online, we have the ambition of bringing our entire collection online, but the idea was to do that completely free. And we got a lot of questions about that, because people are saying, why don't you want to make money out of it? No. We think the collection is free because the copyrights have expired, and the collection belongs to all, belongs to the world. So we are generous, and we want to share it with you. So we don't need anything in return. And that was a radical approach, and we got a lot of attention about that. And you see that other museums follow our example. And we're not the first museum actually who did that, but we were the first museum to do it at this scale and make it so user-friendly to download. So actually you see collections that we can't make ourselves. This is a collection about bold men. We can't, as a museum, we can't make such a selection. But you can. Absolutely no problem. Everybody can be a museum director on our website. But also you have new ways of looking. Here's someone who selects the left bottom parts of a painting. Very special, right? And you see different things, you see different patterns. And maybe, I'm not sure, this Mark, maybe he is a designer, maybe he is an artist. I don't have any idea. You also attract new users, because this lady has a huge collection of the cats of our collection. I didn't know we had so many, but here they are. Apart from stimulating people to collect our art and to become a curator themselves, we want to stimulate the rework, the remix of our collection too. Here you see a tattoo made on an image of our collection. I'm going to show you an example of a clip, and the clip is, we used it at the introduction, and you see 211 images in this animation clip, and that's a way of completely reworking art and giving it a new meaning and giving an abstract, well, it's a form of abstraction, I guess. It's an art piece in itself, I guess. This video is made by Christian Borstlap.
Freezing out here on the pavement.
Thank you, and it's made by a man in his 40s, so I wasn't sure if you would like that. But it was a very important step for us, and in demonstrating that it's not a matter of desacralization or something. People always think that if you change the original artworks, you're not doing right to it. But I think you can make beautiful creations with that, which that demonstrates. Once we've done that, also other parties made new things with our collection, and it's a lot of product design. I'm going to show you some examples. Heineken, for instance, the famous brand, and I saw a van riding across the street this morning, so I was very proud. But they made these art bottles, and they made for every occasion, they make a new set, and they are very, very popular. So I think it stimulates people to drink more beer. You can question that, but this one is this is another view. This is a reinterpretation of 17th century objects, and it was presented actually at the Salone del Mobile a few years ago. It is made by Droog Design. I'm not sure if you know this agency, but here you can see how our old works of art get a new relevance in a totally new context and get a new relevance in today's world. Here you see the Volkswagen vans. They were so popular that they left the stickers on it for a while, and actually a customer bought this version, this van, because it was just they just did it for the fun, but it helped them doing their business, so that's what we loved. And because we wanted to have a discussion at the kitchen table with children, and not necessarily with people who are into art that much, we had this activation, but it's more a campaign, with one of the largest supermarkets in the Netherlands. So we posted 16 pieces of art on milk cartons and make it easier to talk about what you like. And you don't need to know every specific detail about each art piece, but the discussion of, do you like that and what do you like, that's enough for us. We have something else, because we think that if you are going to be creative, you learn more, you see more, and that's why we installed the Rijksstudio Award Design Competition. We did that in 2014, and actually some people here have entered the contest in the first edition, so that with a video game. So we might get to see some examples. I couldn't include them in this presentation, but we want to stimulate people to reuse our art as well. And with this design competition, we have a high prize of 10,000 euros. So we really want to help young artists, but everybody who wants to be creative, making any piece of art based on our collection. The only thing is that you need to have the images from Rijksstudio, right? But you can make whatever you want. We're not the judge of that. We had 3 editions right now. I'm going to show you some examples, and the next edition will be in 2019. So, and we've got a lot of product design in those competitions. So I would really love to have some video games or even videos. So if you want to be creative, please, you're my guest. The first edition, the first winner made a makeup set based on the color DNA palette of this painting. And it was very nice, and we thought of producing this piece of this item and sell it in our museum shop. Not to be rich, to become rich ourselves, but to stimulate this artist. But it turned out to be too complex, because it's very complex to produce a makeup product. So, and we're not a museum. So this is the winner of last year, and this is a woman and a daughter. They did actually a research project. They researched 300 etches by Rembrandt, and all depicting hands. And they made a book of it. And then they decided to make it a wearable. So they made a book bracelet. And they presented this concept at the Salone last edition too. So that's a very other way of being creative with our collection. The last entry, the last edition was held in April this year. And this was the winner from Belarus. And he made sleeping masks based on images of our collection, the eyes of people who were depicted in our collection. And if when you travel, you can wear that, and the eyes keeping a guard for you. So when you sleep, you can take your piece, and the collection keeps a guard. And it turned out a huge success. And to give you some numbers, we received 2,600 entries from all over the world, out of 62 countries. So we were very proud of that, because that proves that we're not only a museum in the Netherlands, but we can be relevant to a much larger group. And that's the same when you have video games or other things. Everything goes around across the globe. So this Rijksstudio initiative and this award allows us to be present in many more people's life than we could have do otherwise. And a lot of entries from this edition, in this edition, were from abroad, where the previous editions were focused on the Netherlands. But now we got a lot of, we had a top 10 consisting of 9 countries. So that's very, we thought it was very cool. And apart from the contest, we had a nice expert jury with designers and other things. This edition, we installed a public jury too. So let the normal audience decide what they like and what not. And that's very funny, because this is the winner of the public award. And this is a beautiful concept of Delft blue lenses, and a beautiful concept behind that, because the makers posed the question, are you looking differently at the world when you wearing those lenses? And that's a beautiful concept, and I think it's not very feasible to make. I guess it would be very scary if someone wore these actually, but the idea behind it is very, very powerful, and I think that's for I don't know anything about video gaming, but I can assume that that would be very crucial in your games too. And the funny thing about this public award is that the normal people completely judged every other things than the expert jury. So the 1, 2, and 3 of the expert jury were the 7 of the 8, 9, and 10 of the public jury. So it was for us very important that professionals are looking differently than you and me. And to give you an overview of the entries, I'm going to show you another clip of the award. Made a dance performance Well, why is this all successful? I think it is, well, you see a lot of reasons there, but I think the most important thing is that we were able to share our collections without any boundaries. So, and letting people completely free in what they did. And it's about sharing our art at expected and unexpected places. And I'll show you an example of that later. But for us, it was very important to get new people, to leverage our brand with new peoples. We call them the culture snackers, people who love beautiful things, who are online a lot, not frequently going to museums, but we reach another audience, and by not giving too many restraints or restrictions or things to do, we could do that. But the other side is that your role as a museum changes, because it's not that you are aside, we're in the society, and that's very important. I think a very important lesson for museums. About unexpected places, in September we reinstalled Rijksmuseum Schiphol at the airport. It's a small Rijksmuseum with 10 pieces of art. It's a real museum, and when you go to the airport you can see that. And for the opening of that museum we made this one. We made an art history exhibition on this baggage belt.
And showing the might and strength of the Amsterdam elite in the 17th century. You wouldn't think it, but this is actually, I'm going to even move the This is actually a painting by Mondrian. Vermeer, another icon of Dutch art. Terwijl je wacht, kun je genieten van kunst. En deze die is van Karel Appel. En Karel Appel was nog iets toen ik als kinderdeed. And that brings us to the end of our very, very short art history class. Please come and see all these wonderful works of art at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam.
Well, I want to leave it with that short art history class. I hope you enjoy your days of camp here, and some of the works of the Rijksstudio are in Pandora's box. So I will be thrilled if you use some of our images, and I'm thrilled to see the results. Thank you very much.
If someone has a question to Linda, this is the time, and then we can move to Rick. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Hello. When do you open applications for the award?
Well, we're planning it right now, so I'll let you know. But I think it will be at the end of 2018.
Okay, just to have in mind.
3 months time or more. So.
Yeah.
You're thinking of that's the inspiration.
Very interesting. Yeah.
I have a question. Where did you find the money? So it's all open. This is, but probably the answer is on that line. So sponsorships.
Yeah, the sponsorships. It's very common in the Netherlands to work together with other parties for everything. So also for making new acquisitions and things like that. So we were sponsored by this beautiful group of companies, but I want to stress that it is also part of the daily activities that needs to be undertaken anyway. So we had to take all those pictures just for our scientific purposes. So it's with a little bit of help, but it's also something that's in our regular activities. Other questions?
No? Okay. So thanks, Linda. Very wonderful presentation. So I introduce Rick Gush. Rick Gush is a veteran from game industry, and today what is important for these guys is understanding how you have done a pioneer in this market when there wasn't the market, you know? So which are the elements, the secret elements, like processes, creative processes, team building success, suggestion to perceive a new market, a new idea of product as you have done. Okay, thanks.
Good enough. So have like 8 hours? How long do you want? Let's see. Oh, this is not very good. And I'm just going to write one thing is all I'm writing. So the reason I'm here today is because I'm big fans of all of you. It's difficult for you to perceive the enormous potential of your own bad selves, but it's easy for me to see it. And it's a privilege just to hang out with you guys for a couple of minutes, because I know darn well that this group will produce some particularly notable works in the future. That's one of the good things about being older, is your vision, your ability to see the future gets better. And I can see the future pretty clearly, and there are some people that will do some really marvelous things here today. So thank you very much for having me. I am your servant. If there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate. This is my email. My schooling, I'm a horticultural pathologist, so if your tree's dead, I know why. And so if any of you have any agricultural, horticultural problems, write me a letter. If you have any questions about games, if you want to talk about any games that you're doing, if you want to talk about how to get a job in the industry, I can't talk about all of that stuff in 20 minutes here, but and I'm not kidding, I would very much appreciate if any of you would write and say, oh yeah, maybe this idiot knows something that could help me. So, let's see. I am a game design consultant, which is a pretty wild job. It's really difficult. In my younger days, I was a sensuality counselor in California, and I taught married couples how to achieve greater orgasms for the females. And now I'm a game design consultant, and I can tell you it's way easier to criticize somebody's sexual technique than their game design ideas. People get really, really personal about their game design ideas. And so that's why my job is hard, because I come into companies, my entree is usually the fact that I'm a narrative designer, so I'm a writer, so I write the dialogue and stories. So that's how I get in, but the games are always horrible. That is the state of the industry. 99.9% of the games that are being made are crap, and I try in my way to push the rock a little bit. It's really, really tough work, but it's great fun. In the last couple of years, I was just talking to our director here, in the last couple of years, I've got a lot of clients in Ukraine. And for me as an American, I'm from California, it's really very emotionally wonderful to have clients in Ukraine, because I grew up in the system where when I was in grade school, we were taught every week, and we trained every week, what to do when the communists attacked. How to hide under your desk, how to duck and roll, how to do all this other stuff. That was my life. So now to have all these friends in Ukraine is like, wow, that's really, really fun. The boogeyman is not a boogeyman. They're just regular people like us. And so I really like that a lot. So what should we talk about here? I suppose I did propose as a title for this, winning is not everything. And that's the first little concept. I made a little list of concepts here. They're not in a particularly articulate order, so we'll sort of bounce around. But winning, not being everything, is the first sort of question that I'd like to pose. If you go through normal computer game design schools or read their books, and probably the most famous game designer instructor in the world now is a guy named Eric who teaches at the University of New York. And his thing is, well, the first thing you want to do when you're designing a new game is figure out how the player wins. And I just about crapped my pants when I read that. I said, that's so wrong, because I'm of the opinion that the first thing you do is try to figure out what's fun, what's the fun thing to do. And then, yeah, you can get around to figuring out that there's a way to win this process and system if you want. But the idea that you have to win in order for a game to be successful, I think is just hooey. And one of the best games of all time, two of the best games of all time, don't involve winning. They are girls playing with dolls and guys playing with army men. I don't know if anybody does that anymore, but it used to be really big sport. And there's no winning there. It is all your fantasy, and you're making up, whether it's having tea with the Duchess or assaulting the clump of mud behind your house. It's your fantasy, but it doesn't make the game any less real or any less enjoyable, the fact that there is not a winning scenario. So you, when you're thinking about your things, you can throw winning as being necessary out of the window, please. Ooh, I like this next one. Games and world peace. I've had the fortune to be making a number of speeches since I've been here in Italy, and my favorite was back in 2000 at a land conference in Florence. I have to remember to say the English names of these places, because even speaking English is a little struggle for me. But and my topic was that I think games can be the agent that brings about world peace. And I actually do bring that. I do believe that. And I see little bits of that happening already. But playing games together is a way for people of disparate beliefs to enjoy camaraderie. And camaraderie in a sense of brotherhood is what will give us world peace someday, when we decide that the people in the different colored shirts are not our enemies, just they have different colored shirts. But there is one problem, and that's that teams, a lot of times, engender bad feelings towards the enemy. There's one hilarious statistic I know. In the United States, at least 12 people are killed every year in arguments over whether Ford or Chevy trucks are better. And so this is people that are on the Chevy truck team that are willing to give their life behind the theory that their truck is better than a Ford truck, better than a damn Ford. And so that's an example of what teams do to you too. The people that are fans of Milan really don't like the fans of Inter. Everybody hates Juventus except for Juventus fans. And so this hatred of the opposing team is actually where we have to start working on this, how to use games and playing of games to bring about a feeling of greater brotherhood and camaraderie that might lead to world peace. But we're going to have to work out what the deal is on teams. Because if we just say, oh, games is teams, and we put everybody in teams, well, those teams inevitably develop the hostilities towards each other. So we're going to have to think of how we do that. And I'm working on a couple of games right now where I'm doing a concept called forced mixing, where people are not allowed to choose who's on their team, but we're deliberately in the background mixing and matching people with different components to deliberately put the Palestinians and Jewish players together on the same team, because we know that that's going to be a good thing. And so I think that that's a good thing for you all to work on, is the concept of team, and how can team membership not engender hostilities, but engender camaraderie. So, here we jump wildly. I have "it's a store" written down. So I help a lot of game companies that want to launch, and the greatest thing out there now is the free-to-play market. Everybody wants to make free-to-play games on tablets. And even the console guys on Xbox and PlayStation are starting to figure out, well, we need to figure out how to make more money. Just because we got 15 bucks from this guy from our game, we need to make more money. And so game development, at least professional game development at this moment, where you're trying to pay your mortgage and put your kids through school with the money that you earn with your games, I have this thing, it's a store. So what you're making is not a game, you're making a store. And you have to think up as many opportunities as possible that might be opportunities for the player to pay some additional money. A couple of years ago, I made a game, a little mobile game with a company here in Italy. And it was really, I loved the title. The publisher wanted a monster truck game. And so my title was Abso-Truckin'-Lutely, which I thought was a pretty cool title. And so we made this game, and we put it out as a free-to-play game, and there was all these things, like, in free-to-play games, there's usually what they call paywalls, like, oh, well, you've already played for 2 hours today. If you want to play more, you have to pay money, or you can come back tomorrow and you get another 2 hours to play. That's the classic thing. So we made our game, and we probably had 150 different things in the store, as it were. My favorite was that there was an option, and I think it was 99 cents. For 99 cents, you could turn all of the obstacles into penguins. Didn't make any sense whatsoever. But in fact, we sold more of that than all of the other things combined. So people are difficult to explain, but it was an example of our knowing that we wanted to have a store and put stuff on the store. We didn't want a Bulgarian store with gray shelves and one product. We wanted a bright and shining store with lots of things. Oh, what shall I buy? And these people bought the penguins, as it turns out. Go figure. But if you're making anything professionally, remember, you're not making a game, you're making a store these days. Okay, the next one I have is called Look What I Made. We are all, as human beings, way, way, way more interested in ourselves than the entire rest of the world. And so what we did is most important. And we are all artists, and we like to make things. Everybody's artistic career begins in their diapers when they say, Mommy, look what I made. And we're always very proud of that first diaper. And so this is important for us as game developers to know that the things that the people like the best are the things that they can take credit for. And so that's really what game design is all about, is engineering situations in which the player gets to take credit for having made a decision. Sure, you might have spent 6 months behind the scene setting it up so that there's 2 choices they can make, but when they make the choice and they see the resulting actions of their choice, that's when the endorphins start flowing in them and they go, look what I just did, look what I made. So that is really our goal as game designers, is to deliver that experience to our users. Look what you made, even though we made it. The future. Let's talk about the future a little bit. I think that the future of video games, I think games take themselves too seriously. And if you're going to buy an Xbox game, there's an expectation that you're going to devote a considerable amount of your life to playing this game and mastering level 47 and really getting into the game. I think that this is going to become more historical. There will always be people that do enjoy spending 14 hours a day on a particular game, but I don't think that that's the future, and I don't think that's the future of the mass. And I don't know, it's sort of changing now, but back when I was a kid, the comics and newspapers were a really big deal. And the comics page was an important part of the newspaper. And I think that's sort of where computer games are going. Is I think that there's going to be a lot of computer games in the future that are delivered sort of on the same level as comics were delivered. Sure, it's 90 seconds of entertainment, and that's all it is. It doesn't have to be more than that. But I think we will have, with our digital delivery systems, little games that last 90 seconds, and they're really cool. Oh, did you play that game? And these games won't have the responsibility to have paywalls and what's our monetization system and all of that. They'll just be the things that are games, that are fun, little things that just occupy our moment of fun. So I believe, in fact, there will be a huge market for what I'm calling little games in the future. And a lot of digital content distributors will appreciate, yeah, and we can stick these in like comics pages on old newspapers. So if you're thinking of games, they don't have to be big, episodic epics. You can have just a little concept that's fun. And you can fool around. I have a game I'm trying to get a publisher for now for mobile phones. It's called Fishbone Finder. And it's a device where you take your mobile phone and you pass it over a plate at a restaurant that you've just purchased a fish, and you can see if there's any bones in there. And of course it won't work. There's not the technology for distinguishing, but it's sort of an alternate reality thing where the game is all about all the different lawsuits that have been filed against the company. So we make different websites that talk about the victims groups you can join and complete. Well, we realized some people had problem with the Samsung phone, but the update 12 should solve that. It'll be a continual stringing out of excuses as to why the game doesn't actually work. So feel free. I haven't found a buyer yet, so you all could steal that idea if you would like it. So this one's sort of a big one. I call it general artist advice. It's difficult because it's really my own advice to myself. I think life was adventure, and I tried to do as many different things as possible in my life. One of my favorite adventures when I was 19, I went and I got a job selling encyclopedias door to door in Mexico City. And I didn't speak Spanish at the time, so it was sort of an adventure. And I had a piece of paper and I wrote some sentences down, so I would go knock on the door and say, "Buenos días, señor. Usted no me conozco, verdad, pero mi nombre es Ricardo." And I spent 6 months in Mexico City selling encyclopedias, and in fact, I made a whole pile of money because people don't buy products because they want the product. They overwhelmingly buy products because they like the seller. That's a huge motivation in a ton of different purchases. And so you have to remember that when you're a salesman. It's not the product. It's the emotional situation. And that's getting back to It's a Store. That's what it's all about. That's why the penguins sold so much, not because anybody needed penguins, because they thought it was a goofy, fun thing. And these days in the Western world, people buy things because they want to amuse themselves. We're all faced with this horrible, horrible, boring lives that we lead that just, you got to brush your teeth and then you have to iron your shirt, and there's a lot of boring stuff in life. So any little bit of fun that we can get, we go at it like magpies. So, 99 cents and everything turns to penguins? Looks like a good deal to me. That really, really works. So I advise all people that want to make computer games to do anything other than play computer games. Go out and get a job as a plumber, work as a carpenter, sell shoes, do anything other than play computer games. Because what happens with the people that play computer games and then try to design computer games, they inevitably end up more or less just copying the games that they like. And it just happens all over the industry. Games are so similar games are a result of people that were playing games. Now they're designing the games. So they never really opened up their mind to other possibilities. They just sort of stay stuck in that same rut. I contend that if that same person had, instead of playing video games, if he had worked as a plumber, he might have had some different insight into how things flow or something like that that might have enabled something more interesting to be done. So, do anything but play computer games, my advice. And the next one's really good too. It's called Being a Second Lieutenant. I'm using the term second lieutenant as a person who is not the boss, but he still has a whole ton of responsibility. And that's actually the position that I prefer taking. I have my own artistic projects where I'm just the guy that does it, and I like doing that. It has a certain satisfaction, and I like she was referring to something about art in unusual places, and I've done a bunch of things like that. Like I have an art show in Rapallo where I put all my art in places that you would never see art. So I put canvases in the butcher shop, I put canvases in the barber shop, put canvases in a bakery, They've got a couple of canvases hanging up in an auto mechanic. So for me, I really understood putting art in places that were not normally where you would think that you were going to see art. But being a second lieutenant is really an important skill to have, because it's giving somebody else the support that they need. And without qualifying that support. So I have a bunch of friends that are artists in here in Milan, and I come here every once in a while to help them out. And you wouldn't believe some of the bad art projects I've helped people on. I mean, just like ridiculous, stupid stuff, but it doesn't matter to me. When I'm being in second lieutenant, I don't care about the quality of the project. All I care about is I like Jim, and he's got an artistic vision, and I want to help him see his vision through. And so it really takes all of my questioning and qualifying out and just says, no, I'm going to be your donkey, and I'm going to do whatever you need to do to get yourself done. And that's sort of what you need to do when you're on a team. When you're on a team, we can't all be equal. We can't all, and we're all going to discuss and we're all going to be happy about every decision. At some point in time, you have to defer your own interests to some other artists and say, nope, I think the shirt should be blue, but you said green, fine, we're making it green because I want to be a good second lieutenant. And that skill to be a good second lieutenant is actually pretty rare. Artists have a tendency to be pretty egotistical and full of themselves and sure that that damn shirt should be green. And they'll get livid mad over it, just like the people with the Chevy trucks. And learning how to calm down and understand that giving power to somebody else's opinion is a really good exercise. That takes some practice, but I think that that's probably something that you guys could do in your workings, is defer a bit more to the other people, even on things that you didn't instantly agree with, and see how that goes. It's a practice that sort of should be like meditation and brushing your teeth. You should do it all the time. Didn't we get to the last item quickly here? I have 4 brains written down. These days, there's a lot of talk about what creative people do to get in a creative space. How do you go from being our normal left brain self that's worried about paying the rent and do I have enough money for the metro, to being the wild creative person that is just playing in your right brain? And I'm very deliberate about it. I have the coolest place in the world in Rapallo where I live. That is my hangout cave for being creative. And that's where I'm creative. I've done it a million times where I've gone to work for a company and they say, this is your desk. And I go sit at the desk and they say, okay, we want a poem written. You can't write poetry while you're sitting at a desk in a cubicle. It's probably be pretty bad poetry. It takes sort of a unloosing of that left brain office mentality to become creative. And so I think it's a personal trip for every one of us artists is, okay, what do I do to get myself in a creative space? And I happen to drink cognac. I don't drink grand quantities, but just having a little sip of cognac, and it's really like stupid how reliable it is. If I and I'm also a stationery supply addict. I really like pens and paper. And so if I get a little sniffer of cognac and a brand new pad of paper and a new pen, I guarantee you something's going to come out of that. It's just sort of like I know myself, well, okay, let's have some fun, and I'll do something good in that situation. So that's my little device as how I get myself in a creative mood. But I think all of you guys that are younger, you may not understand yourselves well enough to understand how you switch from being left brain and get into the right brain. But it's an important skill to learn is, okay, how can I do that? I wrote 4 brains down. It's not just right brain and left brain. We've got 4 brains because most of the time we're actually not fully left brain. We're sort of in the middle brain, but a low-level middle brain. We're a little bit responsible, and yeah, we can do some creative stuff. That's where we are most of the time. But we don't really do really good left brain stuff or really good right brain stuff in that place. We just sort of muddle along and get by. the coolest and the places that I've felt the most exalted when I achieved what I'm calling the fourth brain, which is the higher version of doing both at the same time. Because to be creative is cool, and yeah, neat, you wrote this great piece of poetry, but a piece of poetry doesn't do anything unless you have the left brain capacity to know how to get that poetry out to the world. How are people going to read this poetry? How are people going to encounter this piece of art that I've just created with my right brain? So your left brain tells you how it's going to get that done. So I think the most exalted times for me when I have been able to be ultra responsible and ultra creative at the same time. And I suppose that that's the space that I was in when I made some of the games that are the games that were famous enough that people asked me to come make speeches. My favorite game I ever made wasn't the Command and Conquer games. I don't like war games, but I'll make them because I'm a prostitute and I'll do anything for money. But I like stupid comedies, and so I made a comedy series called the Carandia series, and there was the second in that series in which I had absolutely no executives talking to me ever. Executives really are a downer, in case you didn't know that. Usually they come in and impose some left brain information on the creative process that really messes with you. But I had for more than a year, I had no executives bothering me. I had done well enough with the previous games that they finally said, oh, just do whatever you want. We did it. Man, it was marvelous. We made great games. We broke records. We were, at that point in time in 1994, we were taking about 18 months for a AAA title. And that was pretty fast, because now they take about 3 years. But we were doing 18 months as our average. I made this AAA title in 6 months, which is like stupendous. Nobody could believe it. It's finished. We made it in 6 months, and it was the best one ever, and it sold the most copies. It was the wildly most successful one in that series. So I have understood. It was sort of like Camelot. You know what Camelot? Camelot is that wonderful place that existed for a period of time, but you can't ever repeat it. There's no such thing as figuring out what the recipe was and then we're going to do all the same things and Camelot's going to exist again. No, in our lives there are times that are just marvelous. You can't repeat them. You have to just enjoy them while they're there and then let them go, because there's not a dang thing you can do to try to keep doing it. You have to just say, okay, it's going to go. So those days in Westwood were a Camelot for me. It was so much fun, and the results were pretty good. We sold. So when I finally left Westwood Studios, when I started, I was the first guy to come on the team that wasn't part of the group from high school. It was started by a bunch of guys that went to high school together, and then I was the first outside guy that came in. And once again, I came in as a narrative designer because they needed somebody to write dialogue. And it's not that I'm Ernest Hemingway, but I'm way better than the programmers. So I sort of found a nice little niche there. And so I was the 27th employee of Westwood. And then 9 years later, we were at 105. And another cool thing about Westwood, and I've never had this experience since then, we had 105 people working on it, and every person had their own office. There was no desks. There was no cubicles. Everybody had a door. I'd never even seen that exist in another company. So that was Camelot. It was a wonderful time. And when we finally left, we finally sold. It was funny because we were owned by Virgin Games, and Virgin Games owned some other developers and some IP and so forth, and they put it all on the market, and I think they asked $75 million. Electronic Arts came along, they said, well, that's interesting. We want Westwood Studios, but we don't want any of the rest, but we're willing to pay you $150 million for Westwood Studios just alone. So they paid twice the price for just us. It's not bad for a company with 105 employees. So, and that's why you all asked me here to speak, because it was a particularly notable event. It's not that I know anything more than you guys. I was just in the right time at the right place. And you all will be too at some future time. So that's the end of my concepts. Do we have any fun questions? Ah, e devo dire una cosa, io parlo italiano, io scrivo come un ritardato di 9 anni, ma posso scrivere in italiano, so, si può scrivermi in italiano, non deve essere in inglese, ok? Okay, give me one cool question. No questions at all. Somebody has to fake something. Fake something. Okay.
I will try to make a consideration about the two talks, and I think there are many common areas that we can take and focus. I think the first one is look for the unexpected. For everything that you do, try to think out of the box and create the unexpected result, but with a very big projection how this unexpected action is received from outside. So as you said.
So I've been to this museum. My fun at the museum, I went to the museum and I saw that there were a whole lot of Japanese tourists going in and out. So what I did all morning long is I stood out in front and I asked to be taken pictures of with groups of Japanese people. They thought this was the greatest damn thing they'd ever seen. I mean, I was out there for 4 hours taking pictures with different groups of Japanese, and they were so happy. So that was my little Rijksmuseum art.
And we have also a Rijksmuseum project, so I can share with you. Probably without Rijksmuseum today we were not here all together, because when we were looking for inspiration and content to remix art, in Italy the situation was that when you were in a museum and you use your camera, all the people were paid to block you. So I have this image, my son, the small one, that saw Kandinsky and remember Kandinsky because we play with Kandinsky, remixing Kandinsky at home. And when he saw the original, he went to the paint and pointed out without speaking because he was not able to speak. And in that moment, I took my laptop and then the code, and then in that moment that I took the shoot, I had the hand of the man that was paid not to take emotion from that museum.
Artistic.
Yeah. So in the same moment, my wife write me down, oh, Rijksmuseum share, and there is a contest. And I said, oh, that's a cool stuff. But the date, the submission is tonight. And I was on the other part of the city. I took my car and go at home, and she was very, very anxious with, like, she is always anxious with the time, and was like, you have 10 minutes, and I'm taking high resolution. So for me, it was like a parachute, you know? You don't know what happened. And my personal emotion is that today Linda saw that work, and today you are all here because a person like you and like Linda create the change. And so what I say to all of you is try to think out of the box, try to change methodology that maybe you use for something, try to apply on the other stuff. And the other things that both of you gave us is the ethic of what we have to do. We have to do something for others, and we have to collaborate. So this is not a challenge. Try to give your piece also to other teams. Try to pivot your idea without being so close, because this is the time to show the change and try to make the change. So that's all. If there are no questions, the next step, you will not work. You have just to listen us. The next step is to eat, because we are in Italy, and we will do on that room, and from that moment you are building your team. So thanks for all the attention and the patience.